Welcome to Nick's Scary Stories, where today we're exploring 5 chilling real-life encounters from haunted houses across Fresno, California. These stories were shared by local residents who experienced strange voices, ghostly visitors, and terrifying moments that still haunt them to this day. Our first story comes from a woman who lived on the west side of Fresno, near Dakota Avenue, where a quiet neighborhood hid something waiting in the dark. It was 2015 when my family and I moved into a small rental house near Dakota Avenue. I was a stay-at-home mom, so I spent most of my time in the house while my husband worked and the kids were at school. At first, nothing seemed unusual. It was a little older than the other homes nearby, but it was quiet. Comfortable. That changed about 3 weeks in. Every time I was home alone, I started hearing noises, small ones at first. Like the sound of a rat rustling through a bag of clothes in the bedroom closet. I'd go in to check, but every time I opened the door, the sound stopped. Nothing moved. Nothing was there. One morning after I dropped the kids off at school, my sister called and asked if I could bring her some herbs from our backyard, stuff we use for herbal tea when we're sick. She had a bad cough, and I told her I'd bring it to her house after a quick trip to the store. So I went out back, clipped a small handful of leaves, came inside, and dropped them on the kitchen table. Then I went to the bathroom, washed my hands, and grabbed my purse and car keys. Just as I was locking the door behind me, I realized I forgot the herbs. I went back inside. That's when I heard it again. Not a rustle. A digging sound. It came from the bedroom closet. Slow. Deliberate. I picked up the herbs and walked toward the bedroom. Step by step. Quiet. Careful. When I opened the door, I saw her. A woman, crouched down, back turned toward me, digging through the closet. Her hair was black, long, and messy, covering her face and shoulders. She didn't seem to notice me. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway. Something about her posture, the way she moved, it didn't feel like a person. It felt like something remembering how to move. "Who are you?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't even flinch. But I noticed something else. She was wearing funeral clothes, the kind we use in traditional services, after someone has died. I stepped back, confused and terrified. Again I asked, louder. "Who are you? Why do you keep coming here?" That's when she slowly turned her head. And I saw her face. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her eyes were empty. But worst of all, she looked exactly like me. I screamed and ran out of the house. I didn't stop until I reached my sister's place across town. I didn't tell her what I saw. Not yet. I didn't want to scare her or sound insane. I just told her I dropped off the herbs and stayed there until it was time to pick up the kids. But just before I left, my sister told me something I'll never forget. She said the coughing had gotten worse, and the doctors had finally figured out why. The cancer had started in her breasts, but now it had spread to her lungs. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, and then drove in silence to the school. As I waited in the pickup line, it hit me. Like a jolt. That woman in my bedroom. That thing in the funeral clothes. It wasn't me. And it wasn't just some random ghost. It was my sister's doppelganger. Her death came 2 months later. After the funeral, I finally told my grandpa what I had seen. He didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. He just said, "You need to leave that house." He explained that our home sat at a 3-way stop, a T-junction where the road runs straight into your front door. In our culture, that's a bad omen. They say spirits travel along that road, and when a house sits directly in their path, they can find their way in. He believed I had seen my sister's soul, already passing through. A month later, we moved out of the house for good. Story 2, he was never sleepwalking. Location, Church Avenue, Fresno, California, 2003. Welcome back to Nick's Scary Stories. Our second tale takes us to the outskirts of Fresno, a quiet country stretch along Church Avenue. In 2003, two brothers living in a small apartment began waking up in strange places. What started off as harmless sleepwalking quickly unraveled into something far more unsettling, something they still can't explain to this day. Back when I was in middle school, my family lived in an apartment on Church Avenue, a quiet road on the edge of Fresno, surrounded by orchards and long drives into town. I shared a room with my younger brother, Chai. Sometimes I'd fall asleep in my bed, only to wake up in the living room. At first, I figured maybe I sleepwalked. But Chai said the same thing was happening to him. He told me he'd fall asleep on the couch, and then wake up in bed. But then I asked him something that made his face go pale. If Dad is the one carrying us to bed, why would he carry us back into the living room? That's when we started paying attention. One summer night, we were up late watching TV. Chai was on the floor using his teddy bear as a pillow. He knocked out before the show even ended, so I just turned off the TV and lay back on the couch to sleep. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up. Not to a sound. Not to a movement. I just felt weird. Like I was being watched. I opened my eyes and looked toward Chai on the floor. He was still asleep. But then he started laughing softly. He was talking in his sleep, whispering and giggling, like he was having a dream. Then, he sat up. Not groggy. Not slow. He lifted himself up in one motion, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Straight from the floor to a seated position. I've never seen anyone move like that before. It didn't look possible. His eyes were closed. Then he stood up and walked toward the kitchen. I stayed quiet, just watching. He opened a drawer, rummaged around, then turned and walked toward the bathroom. I followed him, still thinking he was sleepwalking. He came out of the bathroom a moment later and walked straight toward our bedroom. He got into bed, pulled the blanket over himself, and lay still. I followed him into the room, quietly. I didn't want to wake him. But I wasn't tired anymore, so I picked up my Game Boy SP from the desk and turned it on. The screen lit up. And in that faint blue light, I saw that Chai wasn't in the bed at all. There was no one under the blanket. I froze. Then I slowly turned and walked back to the living room, using my Game Boy as a flashlight. And there he was. Still sleeping on the carpet. Still hugging his teddy bear. Still in the same exact position I left him in. I woke him up right away. "Did you just get up and walk around?" I asked. He rubbed his eyes. "No. I've been sleeping." I told him what I saw. He didn't argue. He didn't even try to explain it. He just stared at me, terrified. That night, we both slept in our older sister's room, on the floor, right between her bed and the wall. We stayed in that apartment for another 7 years, but after that night, we never slept in the living room again. Story 3, the locked room in the back. Location, Blackstone Avenue, Fresno, California, 2018. Welcome back to Nick's Scary Stories. Our third tale brings us to Blackstone Avenue, a stretch of Fresno known for busy shops, dusty back roads, and a strange little rental property that seemed too good to be true. But inside this home was a single locked room, and for the family that ignored it, something open that should have stayed sealed forever. It was 2018 when my uncle, aunt, and their 2 daughters moved into a rental home just off Blackstone. The place was old, but roomy. Cheap, too. The landlord warned them it needed a little fixing up, peeling paint, a cracked tile or two, but my uncle was handy, and they didn't mind. There was just one condition. One of the rooms, a small one in the back hallway, had to stay locked. The landlord claimed it was full of old storage items, things that hadn't been cleared from the previous tenant. He promised he'd eventually come remove them, but until then, just leave the door alone. My uncle didn't like it, but they needed the space, and the price was right. So he shrugged it off. They moved in the following weekend. For the first few weeks, everything was fine. My aunt loved the huge backyard. The kids were thrilled with their own rooms. And even though the house creaked in the wind and the floors felt uneven, it felt like a home. But that door, it stayed in the corner of their minds. My aunt once tried turning the knob, just out of curiosity, but it wouldn't budge. No keyhole, no light underneath. Just a plain white door at the very end of the hallway, like it didn't belong. She said it gave her the feeling that something was pressed against it. Listening. Then the noises started. Late at night, after the kids were asleep and the house had gone still, they'd hear faint scratching. Not mice. Not pests. Long, slow scratches. Like nails trailing down the other side of the door. Sometimes, it would be followed by a knock. Always soft. Always 3 taps. My uncle tried to ignore it. Said old houses settle. Pipes expand. Animals move in the walls. But then things started moving. One morning, they woke up to find the kitchen chairs turned sideways. Not knocked over, placed. Their older daughter's favorite doll was found in the hallway one morning, propped up in front of the locked door. No one admitted to putting it there. My uncle changed the locks on all the windows, thinking someone might have been sneaking in at night. But nothing changed. Finally, one evening, my uncle had enough. He grabbed a crowbar from the garage, walked down the hall, and jammed it under the edge of the locked door. The whole family watched. He pried hard. The wood groaned. The metal screeched. Then the lock gave way with a loud crack. And the door swung open. The room inside was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. No windows. No furniture. No boxes. Just 4 walls, and black handprints covering every inch. Ceiling to floor. Smears of something tar-like, sticky. It smelled like rust. And in the middle of the room, perfectly centered, was a small, overturned chair. They didn't even step inside. My aunt called the landlord the next morning and demanded answers. He went quiet. Then said, "I told you not to open that door." She pressed him, demanded to know what had happened in there. The man only said, it was a tenant. A long time ago. She used to sit in that room. Said she heard voices behind the walls. Said if she didn't sit still and listen, they'd come out. When my aunt asked what happened to her, he said, she vanished. Left all her things. But sometimes, at night, tenants still hear her rocking in that chair. They moved out 2 days later. But even now, years later, my cousin still has nightmares about the doll sitting in the hallway, with its face turned toward the door. Story 4, the duplex that should have stayed empty. Location, Clovis border, Fresno County, 2009. Welcome back to Nick's Scary Stories. Our next story takes us just outside of Fresno, near the edge of Clovis, to a small duplex that had been boarded up for years. Locals whispered about it. The previous tenants left without taking their things. And for a while, no one would go near it. Until one couple moved in, unaware of what had happened inside. What they found wasn't just a haunting. It was something repeating itself. In 2009, my cousin Laura and her boyfriend Marco were looking for their first place together. They didn't have much money, so when they found a duplex on the Fresno-Clovis border going for half the market rate, they jumped at the chance. The unit looked fine from the outside, 2 bedrooms, a big yard, and best of all, no neighbors in the other unit. It had been vacant for a while, they were told. Needed light cleaning. That was an understatement. When they moved in, the other side of the duplex, Unit B, was padlocked shut. The windows were covered from the inside with black trash bags duct taped to the frames. Laura assumed the place was just being renovated, but something about it didn't sit right. The first weird thing happened during their second week. They were having dinner when they heard voices through the shared wall. At first, it sounded like a radio, faint static, a low male voice speaking. But it wasn't music. It was repeating something, over and over. "Don't come in. "Don't come in. Don't come in." Marco turned off the TV. The voice stopped. He knocked on the wall. Nothing. Later that night, while brushing her teeth, Laura heard scratching behind the bathroom mirror, slow, deliberate, like someone was tracing a circle behind the glass. She told Marco. He shrugged it off. "Animals in the walls," he said. But the mirror didn't face an exterior wall. It faced Unit B. Over the next few days, things escalated. The thermostat would drop suddenly, freezing cold for no reason. The lights in the hallway flickered, then went out completely. They replaced the bulbs. It kept happening. And then, there were the knocks. Always late. Always soft. Coming from the wall they shared with the other unit. 3 knocks. Then silence. One night, around 3 a.m., Laura woke up suddenly. Marco was gone. She called out for him. No answer. She checked the bathroom, the kitchen. Nothing. Then she saw that the front door was unlocked. She stepped outside, barefoot, calling his name. And that's when she heard it, from inside the other unit. A voice. Quiet. Shaky. Marco's voice. "Laura, don't let it in." Then a loud crash, like furniture being flipped, and the voice stopped. She ran back inside and called the police. They arrived 10 minutes later. The officer asked her which unit the sounds had come from. When she pointed to Unit B, he frowned. "That one's sealed." He walked over, examined the padlock. It was still intact. But Laura insisted. So they broke the lock. When they opened the door, the air that came out was wrong. Cold and stale. Like a room sealed too long. There was no furniture. No lights. Just a stained mattress in the corner. And on the floor, a spiral had been carved into the wood. At the center of it, facing the wall, was Marco. He was crouched, breathing hard, muttering something over and over. The same thing they'd heard through the wall. "Don't come in. Don't come in. Don't come in." When the officer touched his shoulder, Marco screamed like he'd been burned. It took months before he would talk about what happened. And even then, he never gave a straight answer. Just one sentence, over and over. "It looked like me. But it was older." They moved out that week. The duplex? Boarded up again. But people still walk by and say they hear knocking. Always in threes. Always after dark. Story 5, The Voice in the Vent. Location, downtown Fresno, 2021. Welcome back to Nick's Scary Stories. Our final story takes us into the heart of Fresno, the historic downtown district, known for its beautiful old Victorians and century-old buildings. Many of these homes have been restored into apartments, but some, as you're about to hear, should have been left in the past. This is a chilling encounter from a young woman who moved into a seemingly perfect vintage rental until she started hearing a child calling to her. A child no one else could hear. It was the summer of 2021 when I moved into a renovated Victorian home on Divisadero Street, not far from downtown Fresno. I'd just started a new job, and it felt like a fresh beginning. The house had been converted into 3 separate units. Mine was upstairs. I loved everything about it. The high ceilings. The clawfoot bathtub. The stained glass windows that caught the evening light just right. But something about the place felt too quiet. At first, I thought I was just adjusting. I'd lived with roommates for years, and now I was alone for the first time. But even silence has a rhythm. This house's silence felt wrong. It felt like someone was holding their breath. The first time I heard the voice, I was brushing my teeth. It came from the air vent behind the bathroom sink. Faint. High-pitched. Almost playful. "Can you help me?" I froze, toothpaste still in my mouth. I turned the fan off. Everything went still. I leaned closer. Nothing. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, or maybe kids playing outside, even though I lived on the second floor, and the vent faced the interior of the house. The next time it happened, I was doing laundry. Again, from the vent. This time, I heard laughter. Then the same voice. "Why don't you come play?" I stood still for several seconds. Then I grabbed my phone and started recording. But nothing came through. No sound. No movement. No proof. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. But I started sleeping with the light on. Every night, I'd place a towel over the vent before bed. Still, the voice found its way out. Sometimes I'd hear it whispering under the floorboards. Other times, in the walls near the closet. Don't ignore me. I called the landlord and asked if there was ever a child who lived here. He said the house had a long history, built in the 1920s, converted in the 90s, but no, not recently. Then I asked if the vents connected to other units. He paused. "Well," he said, "the basement's sealed off, but technically the ducts still run through there. The downstairs unit used to have access, but no one's been in that crawl space in years." I asked him to come check it. He promised he would. But 2 nights later, the whispering got louder. I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to a knock, not on the door. Inside the vent. 3 sharp taps. Then breathing. Then, "She's coming." I jumped out of bed, yanked the towel off the vent, and shined my flashlight inside. It was dark. Deep. Cold. But I saw something. Not a person. A shape. Crouched low, just past where the metal duct bent downward. Eyes. Reflecting the light. Too small for an adult. Too still for a child. I slammed the vent cover shut and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I demanded the landlord come open the basement. We went down together. The basement was unfinished, concrete floor, exposed brick walls, one dangling bulb on a pole chain. At the far end was a rusted old vent, wide enough for someone to crawl through if they really wanted to. The landlord knelt and looked inside. Then he stepped back and said, "You're not gonna believe this." He reached in and pulled something out. A teddy bear. Covered in dust. Its face chewed. Its ear burned. I felt sick. We called animal control, thinking maybe a raccoon had made a den inside. But nothing ever came out. That night, I packed a bag and stayed with a friend. The next morning, I went back to grab my things. When I opened the apartment door, the vent cover was gone. And written in small, dusty handprints on the wall beneath it were the words, "Don't go. She's already here." I never went back.